Could you, if I, give me just a second. I'll ping you. Okay, hang on. Just a second.
When we go into
Oh.
public session, we're gonna do the.
Give me just a second. Our call is live. Give me just a second, please. Let me just test the AV.
Can you hear me, Rachel?
Yes, thank you, Bree. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, presentation, we're live and recording, so back to you.
There a motion to move to resume open session at 11:37 a.m.
So moved, Board Member Needle.
Second, Board Member Beeman.
There's no sound online if people are talking.
What did she say?
That's true, my third thing. Remember Hemmons?
Staff member Klein, can you hear us?
Can hear you. The sound was cutting in and out again when you first started. So we didn't hear the initial discussion.
This is just moving back into open session. We're in the voting process to go back into open session, and we were trying to reach Board Member Hemmons. It's on mute.
And what are you asking me?
We're just voting on returning to open session.
Yes.
Okay, we have a unanimous yes, we're back in open session. Thank you. And then if you all are not able to hear the conversation again, would you please let us know and we will wiggle the wires again. All right. We want to, I think we're going to do discussion items with Staff Member Klein going over staff input for the executive director recruitment.
Great. So I have a slideshow. Rachel, do you want me to share a screen or do you want to project
No, I
it?
have it. Just give me just a moment
Okay.
and I'll share my screen. Thank you. And then staff member Klein, just say next slide when you're ready for me to progress.
Thank you. So at your last meeting, in what was it? I can't remember the meeting date.
October.
In October, the board requested to get staff input on the executive director recruitment. So I sent out, next slide, an anonymous survey to our staff members at the Board of Pharmacy. It went to the all staff email address, and so that was 23 agency staff. You can see the makeup of the staffing below. Next slide. We created a kind of a method of collecting the feedback that was anonymous, so that staff could be really frank, and wouldn't feel like they had to couch their words or anything. People were, I got a lot of gratitude for making it anonymous, and they were also invited to either answer the questions we asked, not answer them, write their own feedback. It was very kind of open-ended. So basically they typed it into Word, printed it, then deleted the Word document, and then handed the paper either into a box in my office or slipped it under the door when I was gone. Next slide, please. So out of the 23 inquiries, we got 13 responses. Most people answered all the 14 questions. There were a couple that many people didn't answer. So one was about whether there were new programs or initiatives they were hoping for, and one was just kind of an open-ended question about what else they wanted the board to know. People really wrote a lot. They were really kind of very forthcoming with suggestions and gave a lot of good information, both about the executive recruitment process and about what they thought would make for a successful executive director. Next slide, please. So I separated out their feedback into two different categories. One is related to kind of the qualities of an executive director that they would want, and any suggestions they had about the process and what was important to them regarding the process. And then another section that I'll share at the end was more about how an executive director can successfully run the organization. So there were, 5 or 6 questions that touched on behaviors and habits and approaches that a successful director can use to engage them. So we'll go through the kind of core qualities that they like. So communication came up again and again. They really wanted to make sure that our process uh, successfully find somebody who has excellent communication skills, who is an active listener, who is able to kind of flexibly go back and forth. Honesty, authenticity, accountability, transparency was also mentioned several times. A lot of desire for someone who would engage them, engage the whole organization and kind of do more collaborative work. Somebody with experience both in kind of leadership and management. So somebody who is able to tackle the budget, legislative processes, managing the day-to-day operations, as well as someone who has experience and strength in kind of the softer skills. So, we want the perfect combination of all these things. The kind of qualities that they were looking for were empathy, kindness, someone who's collaborative and emotionally intelligent. They really, I think, based on the experience of having several executive directors in short succession, value someone who is able to make a longer term commitment to the Board of Pharmacy, somebody who'll stick around for a while and is steady and deliberate and kind of takes things piece by piece, step by step, and doesn't expect that they'll make a lot of changes immediately. It was really important to almost everyone that this person be a pharmacist. For those that didn't say it had to be a pharmacist, they preferred a pharmacist, but if not a pharmacist, somebody who had experience in the practice of pharmacy. Next slide, please. So this is what I was referring to. So 10 out of 13 really said that it had to be a pharmacist. 2 said they prefer a pharmacist, but really, if you came from any kind of regulatory healthcare position, that would be fine. And 1 said it didn't matter, that you could learn it. You could learn the skills that you needed. Regulatory experience was important, but I think what I read in many of the responses was you can learn regulation, but you can't really learn pharmacy. So if it's somebody coming in who's just been in a community pharmacy, that's fine. They can learn the regulatory piece, but it would be helpful to have it. And then 2 actually specifically said that they would prefer someone who had been either on the board or on the staff of the Board of Pharmacy in a previous role. Next slide, please. And then this was kind of related to this section I included in the qualities of the candidate because I think it'll help you narrow down who you're looking at. It could also have been in the kind of qualities that will make this person successful once they've started. But basically, some of the kind of key areas where staff are looking for movement or help or support are a software upgrade. So our licensing system is outdated. We need to replace it, and the person coming in will need to oversee that. Really being able to advocate for additional staff, help to get all of the staff access to job specific training, and then the ability to do prioritization and streamlining of agency processes. I think that gets back to the management skills that they were looking for. Fostering a positive and respectful workplace culture, somebody who's able to lead the organization forward culturally, particularly with conflict resolution resources. There was several staff mentioned that the way that they have access to the assistant attorney general is important to them, and the ability to really focus in on and finish work fully and consistently, that they are hoping for somebody who will cultivate promotion opportunities from within the organization, and somebody who will kind of slowly and steadily move the organization forward with their input. Next slide, please. I asked a specific question about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what role they expect that the director could play in promotion of DEI. By and large, the staff said they want this person to be a role model, to be the one who leads DEI initiatives, and that the DEI plan that the agency produced was important to them, and they wanted somebody who would see that through. There were a few comments about the organization's kind of overall strength in DEI, that this is a diverse office, a diverse kind of workforce, and we're starting from a really place of strength and somebody who can really see that and honor that and kind of help to carry that through. People thought that this person's role should take on offering opportunities for trainings in DEI, and then just kind of a day-to-day inclusivity, that they would include that as part of the culture. Next slide, please. And then I asked about any reservations or concerns that they had about this process. The by and large, the most common comment was that they really wanted to thank you. They really appreciated that the board had asked for this, and were really grateful that they were able to give input. Several people said that they would like to be part of the process. So they wanted to have, one person framed it as a vote on who was appointed. Many people said they just wanted to be included in the process through interviews or giving feedback as part of a panel. Folks wanted to make sure that there were comprehensive reference checks and background checks so that the decision was made kind of knowing the history of the top candidate. Several people mentioned that they didn't want a rushed process, that if we had to leave the position open longer, that they would prefer that over choosing someone quickly. To use a lot of different platforms to do outreach to get the best possible pool of candidates. There were a couple of references to really trying to generate interest from people from Oregon who are familiar with the way that pharmacies and pharmacists operate in Oregon, so that they were really familiar with our specific rules. Some expressed concern and kind of still holding on to some kind of discouragement about the last process, that it wasn't as transparent as they would have wished, and that there was a failed recruitment process. A couple of people said they felt that there were some really good candidates that didn't end up choosing Oregon Board of Pharmacy. And then a couple mentioned that it would be ideal to have a period where the new executive director had the ability to work with a previous executive director to kind of understand what the role was and how to succeed in it. Next slide, please. And then the last question related to the qualities of the candidates was just very open-ended. So again, they were very grateful to be asked for their input. A few of them said that they really wanted the board to understand that they've been under stress and a lot of challenges in the last year, that trust is a concern in the organization, trust in management decision-making, trust in hiring processes, and in transparent communication, that their workload is very high and really unsustainable, and that the number one most important quality that they think is important is that a licensed pharmacist be the next executive director. Next slide, please. So this is where I broke it up into two sections. I left a moment for questions if you have any, and then in the next section I'll move into the questions that answered kind of how can the next director successfully lead the organization. Are there questions?
Board Member Beaton.
Member Beeman, I really appreciate this document, number one. And there is with, and depending on how the board goes forward, with the option for input and having staff give input, I would just like in the future to maybe see the actual comments rather than having a summary. I appreciate the summary and I know it's a lot to go through and a lot to read, but I also have trust issues from past experiences that I am sort of a person that would like to see the raw data at this point for a lot of these things. So I don't intend this comment to indicate that I'm mistrustful of executive directors' clients' work on this. I greatly appreciate it, but in the feedback process going forward, for the executive, this process, I would really appreciate seeing the raw information, even if it does have to come as a bulk of stuff to read through. Thank you.
Any other comments? I no other comments or hands being raised.
Okay, so next slide, please. So this next section is really just, and I think this would be, as somebody who's recently come into the organization in the interim role, it would have been really helpful for me to have seen some of this guidance. And so my intention is that when the new executive director is hired, that I would pass this on to them. So these next few slides are kind of targeted less toward the board and more toward the new executive director. So next slide, please. So in answer to the question about specific changes in policies that staff would like to see implemented, people, almost every person who answered this question said that flexibility to work remotely was really important to them. We have a hybrid workplace, and that they would like more flexibility than they had previously. That flex time or straight time was something that they really wanted to make sure they were able to use in accordance with the union contract. That adding additional staff was really important to them. That things like access to vehicles and legal counsel was important to them. And then utilizing first the state's leadership training program to serve the training needs of the staff, and then adding additional training dollars to serve the kind of job specific trainings and certifications for our staff. So not kind of general leadership training, but training specific to pharmacy work. Next slide, please. The next question was about communication. So this was just kind of information from the staff about how the next executive director can effectively communicate with staff. Really kind of sharing information by multiple methods was important to them. Involving them early in changes that need to be made and kind of getting people on board, utilizing team meetings to get input before rolling out any changes, communicating consistently. So when the leadership team makes decisions, having a communication method that can kind of consistently rolls out anything to each team separately with an opportunity to ask questions. Again, clearly communicating the reasons and goals and benefits of changes, and then involving staff in problem solving so that they'll be likely to get on board with changes. You saw a lot about kind of the fast pace of changes that have happened in the last year for this team. Next slide, please. And then in terms of kind of workplace culture and creating a positive environment, they asked that this person really have an open door policy, be available to folks, kind of sit with them and learn what they do, learn how they work, getting to know each person individually, and asking for their input. Really supportive of kind of critical conversations. So even when there are disagreements, being able to navigate that and take feedback and use it even when it is critical of what the proposal is or what the current status quo is. There were several people who talked about hiring processes and wanting to make sure that there were growth opportunities within the organization. So if there were new positions opening, that they could be opened internally for internal staff who are already at the Board of Pharmacy to apply to them. And then just kind of basic kind of support for staff, letting them know that they're appreciated, letting them know that they're valued and essential and kind of critical to how the work gets done. And then creating opportunities for positive reinforcement of action. So when people do well, make sure to call it out and share that with them, and then encouraging staff to share with one another when they see good work being done. And then kind of the final one was just the reiterating again how the high workload of this group, the pressure to achieve the key performance measures, and the period of understaffing that they've been through have been very stressful on them and on their teams, and that the connection between them, not necessarily in person in the office, but having kind of a ebb and flow, being able to reach out to one another to get help or lean on each other was really helpful for them to remediate stress. Next slide, please. So how can the executive director engage with staff to gather ongoing feedback and suggestions? The open door policy was mentioned several times, just kind of being available to discuss things when people had questions, being accessible, getting to know people. I thought the notion of being in the trenches was really critical, kind of wanting to know that the next leader is part of the team and not just directing, but also kind of helping to do the work. The creation of an environment that didn't uh, didn't create fear around giving feedback was mentioned several times. And then really the importance of listening to people. There's a lot of longevity in many members of the staff, so they've been in the organization for a decade, 2 decades. There's a lot of lived experience, and really wanting to make sure that the next director taps into that experience and uses it to help make decisions. I think that was the last slide. So really, it was great information. I think the staff really appreciated so much that you wanted to include them and include their feedback in your process, and is really optimistic that this will help you to arrive at a great decision in terms of the way that we recruit and also the way that you make a decision around the final executive director. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Rosa. This is Board Member Chin. Well, we are at noon 02. We could break for lunch and come back and start with Kylan. The will of the board? Let's do it. So we'll be back at 1, we have to do an hour, don't we? Yep, 1:02. Thank you.
Thank you.